They thought humans were too weak to survive in the alien zoo, a prison designed to contain the most savage monsters in the galaxy. It wasn't meant for people. It was meant for beasts that tore planets apart, creatures that killed for sport, apex predators with claws like blades and minds as dark as space itself. But when a human was accidentally thrown into that nightmare, something happened no one predicted. He didn't scream. He didn't run. He understood. You know that moment when you realized your life has officially hit rock bottom? Mine came when I found myself standing in front of a sign that read Vort to Containment Facility, Maximum Security, Xenobiological Prison. Below that, in smaller print that somehow managed to look condescending, it added, Where careers come to die. My name is Jake Martinez, and 3 months ago, I was Dr. Jake Martinez, respected xenobiologist with tenure at the Galactic University. Then I made the tiny mistake of accidentally releasing a pack of carnivorous space rabbits into the Chancellor's office during a faculty meeting. Apparently they looked hungry isn't considered adequate scientific justification for mass chaos. So, here I am staring at what the Galactic Employment Bureau cheerfully described as a challenging opportunity in exotic animal management. Translation: We're sending you to the worst job in known space as punishment for being an idiot. The facility squatted on the surface of Kepler 442c like a metallic tumor, all harsh angles and warning lights. Through the reinforced viewports I could see things moving in the shadows that made my xenobiology degree feel about as useful as a chocolate teapot. Director Claxton emerged from the airlock to greet me, if you could call it greeting. Picture a scarecrow that someone inflated with arrogance and gave 4 arms, then dressed in an official uniform covered with more badges than a scout convention. His species, the Xentorans, were known for 2 things: bureaucratic efficiency and an unshakable belief that they were better than everyone else. Martinez, he said, managing to make my name sound like a communicable disease. I trust your journey was adequate. We've prepared your quarters in Block 7. That's the section we reserve for expendable personnel. Expendable? I asked, though I was pretty sure I didn't want to know the answer. Claxon's forearms gestured dismissively. Your predecessors averaged 14.3 days of employment before requiring replacement. We found it's more cost-defeating to assume you won't last long. He consulted a digital clipboard with one hand while simultaneously filling out what looked suspiciously like a pre-written termination form with another. The creatures here aren't like the docile specimens you're used to handling. These are the monsters too dangerous for regular zoos. The nightmares that make other nightmares check under their beds. I nodded slowly, watching a massive tentacle slap against a reinforced window somewhere in the distance. And my job is, don't die immediately, Claxon said cheerfully. Everything else is optional. The tour of the facility was like being given a guided walk through my own future nightmares. Claxon led me down corridors lined with containment cells that hummed with enough energy to power a small moon. Each one housed something that evolution had apparently designed specifically to ruin someone's day. These are the melters, Claxon announced proudly, stopping in front of a cell containing what looked like living lava with anger management issues. They dissolve organic matter on contact. We lost Handler Rodriguez when one of them sneezed. Sneezed? I asked. Then immediately regretted it. Through reinforced titanium. Very messy. We're still finding pieces of Rodriguez in the ventilation system. He made a note on his clipboard with disturbing enthusiasm. Over here we have the wraiths. They phased between dimensions at will. The next cell appeared empty until something that looked like a cross between smoke and pure malevolence briefly materialized. Studied me with what might have been eyes, then vanished again. A small placard on the wall read Handler Peterson. Disappeared Tuesday, possibly in Dimension 7. And this, Claxon said, stopping at a massive reinforced door marked with more warning symbols than a hazmat convention, is our prize specimen, the Void Crusher, capable of creating localized black holes. Handler Thompson made the mistake of feeding it late. What happened to Thompson? Let's just say he's now part of the local space-time continuum. I was beginning to understand why the job posting had been so vague about life expectancy. That's when I met Zara, the facility's maintenance chief. She emerged from an access panel like a grease-stained guardian angel, her tool belt jangling with instruments I couldn't identify. Her species, the Coroxians, were basically humanoid lizards with an attitude problem and natural resistance to most forms of death. Another new guy? She asked, looking me up and down with the expression of someone evaluating meat quality. What happened to the last one? Educational experience with the plasma wasps, Klaxon replied. Very brief education, Zara snorted. 3 weeks I had money on 2.5. She turned to me with something that might have been sympathy if you squinted. Piece of advice, newbie. The creatures here aren't just dangerous. They're smart dangerous. They figured out that humans are basically walking snack packs with delusions of competence. Encouraging, I muttered. The average survival rate for your species in this facility is approximately 0.3%, Klaxon added helpfully. But don't let that discourage you. Zer wiped her hands on a rag that had seen better centuries. The thing is, most handlers come in here thinking they can use standard zoo protocols, treats, behavioral conditioning, positive reinforcement. These things eat positive reinforcement for breakfast, then use the bones to pick their teeth. We continued the tour past cells containing horrors that defied both classification and sanity. But it was the final stop that made my blood turn to ice water. At the end of the corridor stood a door that was less door and more armored vault, surrounded by warning signs in 17 different languages. The ones I could read all basically said the same thing. Abandon hope. All ye who enter here seriously, we're not kidding this time. And here, Klaxon announced with the pride of someone showing off their prize-winning roses, we have the crown jewel of our collection, the Devourer. The containment cell beyond that vault door was the size of a cathedral and twice as ominous. Emergency lighting cast everything in a hellish red glow, and the air recycling system worked overtime to filter out what I could only assume was the scent of impending doom. In the center of this technological nightmare sat something that made every other creature in the facility look like a cuddly pet. The Devourer was roughly the size of a small shuttle covered in midnight black scales that seemed to absorb light. It had 6 legs ending in claws that could probably open cans or disembowel small moons with equal ease. Its head was all teeth and intelligent eyes that tracked our movement with the focused attention of a predator deciding which one of us would make the better appetizer. Magnificent, isn't it? Klaxon whispered with the reverence usually reserved for religious experiences or really good pizza. Apex predator from the Andromeda sector. Intelligence quotient off the charts. Capable of digesting any known material including most metals. What happened to its previous handlers? I asked, though I was developing a pretty good idea. Handler Williams lasted 6 hours. Handler Park managed 8. Handler Foster actually made it to day 2 before the unfortunate incident. Let me guess. Eaton, Williams, and Park. Yes, Foster was more creative. The Devourer somehow convinced him to open the containment field. We found Foster's remains scattered across 3 different sectors of the station. I stared at the creature, which stared back with what I could swear was amusement. There was definitely intelligence behind those eyes. Malevolent, calculating intelligence that was currently sizing me up like a particularly entrancing puzzle. That's when my stomach decided to announce its presence with a growl that echoed embarrassingly through the chamber. I'd been traveling for 2 days and hadn't eaten anything since the processed protein bar that had passed for breakfast on the transport shuttle. The Devourer's massive head tilted slightly and it made a sound that was part rumble, part chuckle. Did it just laugh? I asked. Possible, Klaxon replied. But his voice had a nervous edge. It doesn't display humor, only hunger and mild contempt. I looked at the creature again. It was definitely amused by something. Without really thinking about it, I pulled out the emergency ration pack from my kit and held it up. Yeah, I know the feeling, I said to the Devourer. The food on that transport was terrible. I'm pretty sure they were serving recycled cardboard with a sight of regret. The creature made that rumbling sound again. And this time there was no mistaking it for anything other than laughter. Klaxon's 4 eyes went wide. Martine, what are you doing? Having a conversation, I replied, tearing open the ration pack. It contained something that claimed to be beef stew but looked more like brown disappointment. You know what? This looks about as appetizing as what they probably feed you. I walked closer to the containment field, ignoring Klaxon's strangled protests. The Devourer watched my approach with interest rather than hostility. I bet they give you the same processed nutrient slop every day, right? I said, stirring the alleged stew with a plastic spoon. No variety, no flavor, just technically edible matter designed to keep you alive and miserable. The creature's rumble took on an almost conversational tone. and for a moment I could have sworn it nodded. "Martine, step away from the containment field immediately," Klaxon ordered. "You're exhibiting extremely dangerous behavior." "Dangerous? I'm just talking to him." I took a bite of the ration pack and immediately regretted it. "Oh, that's awful. Here I was complaining about your food when mine tastes like they accidentally mixed the seasoning packet with industrial lubricant." The devourer made a sound that was unmistakably sympathetic. Over the next 2 weeks, I developed what could generously be called a routine, and what Director Klaxon preferred to call a slow-motion suicide attempt with administrative paperwork. Every morning I'd grab my breakfast ration and head to the devourer's containment cell. The creature, who I'd started calling Rex because devour seemed unnecessarily dramatic, had apparently decided I was the most interesting thing to happen to him in decades. "Morning, Rex," I'd say, settling into the chair they'd installed outside his containment field after the 3rd day when it became clear I wasn't going to be eaten immediately. Ready for another thrilling day of captivity and questionable nutrition. Rex would respond with what I'd learned was his version of a greeting, a low rumble that somehow managed to convey both acknowledgement and existential despair. For a creature capable of creating localized gravitational anomalies, he had a surprisingly sophisticated sense of irony. "You know what I realized?" I told him one morning, poking at something labeled as scrambled eggs but clearly manufactured in a chemical plant. "They don't actually want you to be happy here. They want you to be contained and miserable. Happy creatures are unpredictable. Miserable creatures are just, well, still unpredictable, but in more predictable ways." Rex's massive head tilted in what I'd come to recognize as his thinking pose. Then he did something that made my coffee mug slip from my suddenly nerveless fingers. He spoke not in English, obviously. His voice was like distant thunder, filtered through a rock slide, but there was definitely intention behind it. Communication. I'd been talking to him for 2 weeks, and he was finally talking back. "I have no idea what you just said," I admitted, "but I'm pretty sure it was either profound or you just told me my eggs smell like garbage. Both would be accurate." Rex made that rumbling laugh again, then moved to the far corner of his cell. He began arranging the scattered debris from his various escape attempts into patterns. After a few minutes, I realized what I was looking at. Are you drawing?" I asked. The patterns were crude but unmistakably representational. Stick figures basically, but with enough detail to tell a story. Rex pointed to a large figure in the center, then to himself. Then he pointed to smaller figures arranged around the edges and gestured toward the facility's corridors. "That's you in the middle, and those are the other creatures," I said slowly. "What are you trying to tell me?" Rex grumbled something that sounded frustrated, then began rearranging the debris. This time the large figure was surrounded by the smaller ones, but they were all facing outward, like they were protecting something in the center. "You're not trying to eat everyone," I realized. "You're trying to organize them." The look Rex gave me could have powered the station's reactor core. Pure undiluted satisfaction that someone had finally understood. "You're bored out of your mind," I continued, the pieces falling into place. "You're an apex predator with the intelligence to plan complex strategies, and they've got you sitting in a box doing nothing all day. No wonder you keep trying to escape. You're not homicidal. You're understimulated." Rex's agreement was so enthusiastic it rattled the containment field. Word of my breakthrough with Rex spread through the facility like a particularly aggressive infection. Zar was the first to comment, appearing at my shoulder one morning with her usual expression of professional skepticism. "So you figured out the murder machine is actually just lonely?" she asked, watching Rex demonstrate what appeared to be his version of fetch using chunks of reinforced hull plating. "More than lonely, he's intellectually frustrated. Look at him, Zara. When's the last time you saw any of the creatures here actually engaged with something?" She considered this, watching Rex carefully stack debris into increasingly complex geometric patterns. "Point taken. Most of them just pace or sleep or plot elaborate revenge fantasies against the maintenance staff. Rex doesn't want revenge. He wants stimulation, challenge, purpose." I pulled out a data pad and started sketching. What if we tried treating the creatures here like what they actually are instead of what we're afraid they might be? And what are they? According to your expert analysis, prisoners serving life sentences for the crime of being too dangerous for polite society. Zara's expression shifted from skepticism to something approaching interest. Keep talking. Look at their behavior patterns. The melters aren't randomly aggressive. They're territorial. The wraiths aren't trying to escape. They're trying to hide. And Rex isn't trying to kill anyone. He's trying to communicate. The previous handlers would disagree with that assessment, Zara pointed out, assuming they could disagree with anything given their current status as digestive byproducts. The previous handlers treated them like monsters. Rex responded accordingly. I gestured toward the creature who was now building what appeared to be a scale model of the facility out of debris, but treat him like an intelligent being, and he acts like one. Over the following days, I started applying the same approach to the other creatures. The melters, it turned out, were highly social and responded well to group activities. The wraiths were basically cosmic introverts who just wanted some privacy and maybe a good book. Even the Void Crusher, once I figured out it was trying to create art rather than weapons of mass destruction, became significantly more cooperative. Director Claxon's reaction to these developments was about what you'd expect from someone whose entire worldview was being systematically dismantled by a disgraced xenobiologist and his monster friends. This is highly irregular, he announced during one of his increasingly frequent visits to Rex's containment area. These creatures are designated as maximum security threats. They are not pets. No, I agreed, watching Rex demonstrate his latest invention, a gravity-assisted ball return system that would have impressed any physics professor. They're not pets. They're people. 3 weeks into what Claxon had started calling the Martinez experiment, with the same tone most people reserve for discussing natural disasters, the facility received word that would make everyone's life significantly more complicated. Corporate inspection, Zara announced, sliding into the cafeteria booth across from me with the expression of someone who'd just been told their vacation was cancelled due to impending apocalypse. Full executive team from Galactic Zoo Corporation. They're coming to evaluate the facility's continued viability. I merely choked on what the menu optimistically called a sandwich. Continued viability. Translation: they're here to decide whether to keep funding this place or just launch the whole station into the nearest star and call it a day. She pulled out a datapad and started scrolling through what looked like a very long list of complaints. Apparently, word has gotten out about your unconventional methods. Some people are calling it revolutionary. Others are calling it proof that humans shouldn't be allowed near anything more dangerous than a houseplant. What's Claxon's take on all this? He's been locked in his office for 6 hours writing reports that basically amount to "it wasn't my fault." The human is clearly insane. He's planning to recommend they euthanize the entire creature population and convert the facility into a filing cabinet storage unit. The thought of Rex and the others being destroyed because they were finally starting to show their true potential made my stomach clench. How long do we have? We arrive tomorrow morning. Full inspection, interviews with staff and a comprehensive evaluation of each creature's containment status. Zara's expression was grim. Jake, these people don't care about your breakthrough with the creatures. They care about liability, insurance costs, and public relations. A facility full of happy, intelligent monsters is actually more terrifying to them than a facility full of mindlessly violent ones. That night, I found myself sitting outside Rex's containment field explaining the situation. He listened with the focused attention of someone who understood that his life was about to be decided by people who would never bother to learn his name. The thing is, I told him, they need to see that you're not just contained, you're actually valuable, educational, maybe even entertaining. Rex's rumble had a questioning tone. I know it sounds degrading, but if we can show them that you and the others are assets rather than liabilities, maybe we can keep this place running. I pulled out my datapad and started sketching. What if we put on a demonstration? Show them what you're really capable of when you're engaged instead of just imprisoned. Rex considered this, then began arranging debris into new patterns. This time the shapes looked like a stage with figures arranged around it. He pointed to the largest figure, then to himself, then made what I'd learned was his version of a theatrical bow. You want to be the star of the show? I asked. His rumbling response was unmistakably affirmative, with undertones of what could only be described as mischievous anticipation. The next morning arrived with all the subtlety of a solar flare. The corporate inspection team consisted of 5 executives who looked like they'd been designed by a committee dedicated to removing all traces of personality from the universe.
They wore identical gray suits, carried identical datapads and shared the same expression of someone who'd rather be literally anywhere else. Director Klaxon met them at the airlock with enough nervous energy to power a small city. "Welcome to the Vorak containment facility," he announced, his forearms gesturing so frantically he looked like he was trying to achieve flight. "I've prepared comprehensive reports on all our security protocols and containment procedures." The lead executive, a tall Centurion woman whose name tag read Director Vex, barely glanced at the offered datapad. "We're here to assess viability, not admire paperwork. Show us the creatures." I'd spent the morning preparing what I hoped would be an impressive educational demonstration. Rex had been surprisingly enthusiastic about the plan, though I was starting to suspect he had his own agenda. The other creatures had also been briefed insofar as one could brief beings whose idea of subtle communication involved localized reality distortions. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced as we gathered in the main observation chamber, "what you're about to see represents a revolutionary breakthrough in xenobiological interaction theory." Director Vex checked her chronometer with the expression of someone counting down to their own execution. "Proceed." I activated the containment field modifications I'd been working on, creating a larger interactive space where Rex could demonstrate his capabilities. He emerged from his cell with what I'd learned to recognize as his Showtime posture, confident, controlled and absolutely radiating intelligence. "The creature you see before you," I continued in my best educational documentary voice, "is not simply a predator. He's an engineer, an artist and a philosopher." Rex began his demonstration by constructing an elaborate sculpture from the provided materials. His claws, which could slice through reinforced steel, worked with the delicacy of a master craftsman. Within minutes he'd created a scale model of the solar system, complete with orbital mechanics that actually functioned. The executives watched with expressions ranging from mild interest to barely concealed boredom. "Impressive fine motor control," one of them noted, making marks on his datapad. "Still doesn't address the fundamental safety concerns." That's when Rex decided to improvise. Instead of moving on to the next planned demonstration, he began modifying his solar system model. He added additional elements, creating what looked like a representation of hyperspace travel routes. Then he looked directly at the executives and began to speak, not in his usual rumbling thunder but in perfectly clear, if heavily accented, Galactic standard. "You people," he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made small planets reconsider their orbital patterns, "have the imagination of a bureaucratic filing system." The silence that followed could have been packaged and sold as a premium noise and selling product. Director Vex's datapad slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers. "It talks." "Oh, I can do much more than talk," Rex continued, apparently enjoying the stunned expressions around him. "I can calculate hyperspace trajectories, compose poetry, and create sustainable fusion reactions using common household materials. I've also been working on a unified theory of quantum mechanics that would revolutionize your understanding of reality, but nobody bothered to ask." "This is highly irregular," Klaxon stammered, all four of his arms now flailing in different directions. "The creature has never displayed verbal communication abilities before." "That's because nobody treated me like I had anything worth saying," Rex replied with what could only be described as cosmic disdain. "You locked me in a box and expected me to be grateful for the privilege." One of the executives, a nervous-looking Corellian, raised his hand tentatively. What do you want?" Rex's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement if you ignored the underlying threat of cosmic destruction. "I want a proper laboratory intellectual stimulation and maybe some food that wasn't designed by committee to be as flavorless as possible." He paused thoughtfully. "Also, I'd like Jake here to be promoted. He's the first person in decades who's treated me like a sentient being rather than a particularly dangerous houseplant." Director Vex looked at me with the expression of someone whose entire worldview had just been fed through a quantum processor. "Mr. Martinez, how long has the creature been articulate?" "He's always been articulate," I replied. "We just finally started listening." That's when things went spectacularly wrong. Rex, apparently feeling that the demonstration was going too smoothly, decided to invite the other creatures to join the conversation. With a casual gesture that probably violated several laws of physics, he temporarily disabled the containment fields throughout the facility. The melters oozed into the observation chamber with what could generously be called enthusiasm. The race phased in and out of visibility, adding an element of supernatural suspense to the proceedings. Even the Void Crusher made an appearance, its gravitational field causing everyone's hair to stand on end and making the floor tiles buckle in interesting patterns. "Friends," Rex announced to his fellow creatures with the tone of someone introducing the opening act at a concert. "I'd like you to meet our corporate visitors. They're here to decide our fate." The executives, to their credit, didn't immediately flee. They did, however, huddle together in a tight group that suggested they were reconsidering their career choices. "This is a containment breach," Director Claxon announced, stating the obvious with the kind of precision that would have impressed a precision instrument. "We need to activate emergency protocols immediately." "Actually," I said, watching the creatures arrange themselves in what was clearly a planned formation, "I think this is a job interview." What followed was the most surreal job interview in the history of interstellar employment practices. The Melters, it turned out, had been working on a collaborative acid etching project that could revolutionize semiconductor manufacturing. The race demonstrated their ability to phase through dimensions by retrieving objects from parallel realities, essentially providing infinite storage space. The Void Crusher showed off its precision gravitational control by creating a miniature black hole that sucked up only the dust and debris in the room, leaving everything else perfectly untouched. Essentially, Rex explained to the increasingly bewildered executives, "You've been running a maximum sexual prison when you could have been operating the galaxy's most advanced research and development facility." Director Vex had gone through several stages of shock and was now approaching what psychologists call paradigm shift acceptance. "You're saying these creatures, excuse me, these individuals have been developing technological innovations while in containment. Boredom is a powerful motivator," one of the race commented, flickering in and out of visibility. "When you have nothing but time and a desire not to go insane, you tend to get creative." A melter flowed forward, leaving a perfectly etched blueprint on the floor behind it. "This is a design for a faster-than-light communication system that doesn't require quantum entanglement. We've been working on it for 6 years." The Void Crusher's gravitational field pulsed gently, causing everyone's pens to float in a perfectly synchronized orbital pattern. "I've been composing symphonies in 4-dimensional space. The acoustic properties are fascinating." Director Claxon, meanwhile, had progressed through denial and anger and was now firmly planted in the bargaining stage of grief. "Surely, we can't just ignore the security protocols," he stammered. "These creatures are classified as Class X threats. There are regulations, procedures, forms to fill out in triplicate." "Orms," Rex rumbled with amusement that contained just a hint of cosmic menace. "I've spent the last 3 weeks calculating the precise gravitational adjustments needed to turn this entire facility into a tourist destination. Did you know that with the right modifications we could create a stable viewing platform where visitors could safely observe us demonstrating our various capabilities?" One of the executives, who had been frantically taking notes, looked up with the expression of someone who just seen $signs written across the cosmos. "You're talking about converting a containment facility into an educational entertainment complex, with built-in research and development capabilities," added a wraith helpfully. "We could license our innovations to offset operational costs." The transformation in the corporate executives was visible. They'd arrived expecting to evaluate an expensive liability and had instead discovered what amounted to a self-contained think tank populated by beings whose casual abilities violated most known laws of physics. "What would you need to make this work?" Director Vex asked, her datapad now filled with calculations rather than termination orders. Rex looked at me with something that might have been a grin if you ignored the fact that his species had evolved past the need for traditional facial expressions. "We'd need new management. Someone who understands that intelligence and creativity can't be contained, only directed." Director Claxon's forearms dropped to his sides in defeat.
"I think I hear my home world calling. Something about urgent family business that requires my immediate attention for the next several decades."
"Excellent timing," Director Vex replied without looking up from her notes.
"Mr. Martinez, how would you feel about a promotion?" 3 months later, I found myself sitting in what used to be Director Claxon's office, reviewing the facility's transformation from galactic nightmare to premier educational destination. The nameplate on my desk read Director Jake Martinez, Interspecies Relations and Applied Xenobiological Innovation. The changes had been remarkable. Rex now had his own laboratory, where he worked on theoretical physics when he wasn't giving tours to visiting scientists. His latest project involved developing sustainable wormhole technology. which he claimed would be ready for testing as soon as someone brings me a decent cup of coffee. The Melters had established an artists' collective, and were taking commissions for architectural etching projects across 3-star systems. The Wraiths ran an interdimensional consulting service that had a waiting list stretching into the next calendar year. Even the Void Crusher had found his calling as a cosmic landscaper, using his gravitational abilities to create garden spaces that defied conventional understanding of up and down. Zyra had been promoted to Chief of Operations, a position that mainly involved making sure the facility's new residents didn't accidentally improve their living quarters beyond the structural capacity of the station. The irony, I reflected during one of my morning conversations with Rex, is that the galaxy spent so much effort trying to contain you that nobody bothered to ask what you actually wanted to do with your lives. The greater irony, Rex replied, carefully adjusting the gravitational lensing system he'd installed to give visitors a better view of his latest sculpture, is that what we wanted was exactly what the galaxy needed: innovation, creativity, and solutions to problems they didn't even know they had. The facility now hosted 3 educational tours daily, a research symposium twice monthly, and had a waiting list of scientists eager to collaborate with our residents. The gift shop, run by a collective of reformed space pirates who'd volunteered for community service, was turning a substantial profit selling miniature gravity wells and dimensional phase shift toys. Any regrets about your career change? Zara asked during one of our weekly status meetings. I looked out the observation window at Rex, who was currently explaining the finer points of quantum mechanics to a group of wide-eyed university students, while simultaneously juggling small black holes for their entertainment. Just one, I replied. I should have been fired from my previous job years ago. Rex caught sight of me through the window and waved one massive claw in greeting. In the background, a Wraith was demonstrating dimensional storage techniques to a team of engineers, while the Melters worked on a collaborative mural that was apparently also a functional circuit board. It occurred to me that the real monsters in this story had never been the creatures locked in containment cells. They'd been the people who decided that intelligence, creativity, and individuality were things to be feared and suppressed rather than celebrated and nurtured. But that's a lesson for another day. Right now, I had a facility to run, innovations to oversee, and the occasional tourists to rescue from Rex's enthusiastic demonstrations of applied gravitational dynamics. After all, someone has to make sure the galaxy's most dangerous creatures don't accidentally solve all of its problems at once. That kind of productivity could be seriously disruptive to the established order of things. And honestly, after spending most of my career in traditional academia, a little productive disruption was exactly what I'd been looking